What's up, everybody? This is FTW with Imad Khan. I'm your host, Imad Khan, and joining me today on this Becoming the Villain edition is Michael Arin, editor-in-chief of the Esports Bar Association Journal. And later on, we'll have freelance journalist Billy Sudholm to talk Call of Duty League, plus a Fan of the Week question. But first, Fortnite versus Apple. Last Thursday, Apple delisted the Fortnite app off its App Store after Epic Games tried to bypass the 30% fee imposed to all developers. This comes 2 weeks after tech CEOs had to stand in front of Congress in highly televised antitrust hearings. Representative Hank Johnson from Georgia grilled Apple CEO Tim Cook on its pricing policies and if the company was taking advantage of developers. Cook replied that the 30% fee has never increased, nor would it ever, and that some companies have special arrangements, like Amazon, which only has to pay a 50% fee on digital goods and not physical goods. Shortly after the delisting, Google too removed Fortnite off the Android store. This prompted Epic Games to sue both Apple and Google immediately. Epic argues that Apple, more specifically, has monopolistic control in its app microeconomy. Users cannot go outside of the App Store to install applications on Apple devices, unlike Android. Cook argued during the congressional hearings that Apple doesn't have dominant market share anywhere in the world. And this is true. Apple's products are premium, so it's not looking to be the number one smartphone in any country. So, Michael, given all of this, it seems that Epic was ready to throw down. This will likely be a prolonged battle with millions of dollars being thrown at lawyers. Do you think Epic has a chance to win this suit?
I think that it's not a new suit. This has been an ongoing debate for at least the past, I would say, 2 years or so. Back in 2019, Spotify complained similarly of Apple's pricing. In fact, when it was forced to charge Spotify users on Apple devices $13 rather than $10 because of this 30% fee, then Apple came out with its own music streaming service and charged only $10. Spotify complained of this actually to European antitrust investigators, and there's been an investigation in Europe ever since. However, the United States story comes more from the private side of litigation against Apple. Recently, in 2019, there was a case about whether or not consumers could sue Apple, alleging that they are being charged super competitive prices because of this same 30% fee. This is just another iteration of that same dispute going on before Congress, before the European antitrust investigators, and before the courts today. Fortnite and Epic are trying to show that Apple really does have monopolistic power over the iOS devices. The question underlying the suit is really whether or not that's the proper market, and it's a complicated analysis, and it's difficult to decide whether or not there is some merit to it. A monopolistic company that charges super competitive prices doesn't really violate the law. They're allowed to reap those benefits. But where they unlawfully maintain that monopoly power over the market, that is where there might be some merit in this suit.
I mean, do the current laws, at least in the US, can they even be cross-applied to these micro-app economies that exist on like their own unique little platforms with, I guess they're using US currency. I don't know, can these laws really apply?
That's the big question before Congress right now. I was here 2 weeks ago to break down the big tech antitrust hearings where senators and congresspeople truly questioned whether or not the antitrust laws could be used to stop this monopolistic behavior or any of these harms to the market. On the Republican side, we actually heard many cries that the laws were sufficient. And in fact, I think that the recent suits against Apple are trying to prove this. They are saying that the Sherman Antitrust Act and other state law acts like the Cartwright Act, which Epic is using to allege harm in its suit against Apple and against Google, they are sufficient. They're able to stop Apple from charging these super competitive prices. On the other hand, as I mentioned, there are some potential detrimental, serious flaws to the argument, mainly around how the courts have construed markets, how the courts have construed injury to consumers, and the focus on the consumer welfare standard. It's a tough call to say whether or not the laws are sufficient, but this lawsuit is definitely challenging that.
So let's go on to kind of the suit against Google. And this one, I guess I'm having more trouble wrapping my head around. I mean, I understand that Google is also charging a 30% fee, not only on app purchases, but in-app purchases, but it's also possible to essentially install an app outside of the Google Play Store. So what are the merits behind the suit against Google?
So we see a lot of the same claims between the two suits, Apple and Google. we see monopolization claims and tying claims, essentially alleging that Apple controls the iOS market and Google controls the Android market. But as you mentioned, those two markets are very, very different. If you have an Apple device, you have to use the Apple Store. There's no getting around it. There's no way to sideload or direct download any applications onto your phone, at least not within the terms of service that Apple requires you to follow. However, Google has taken a different approach, at least with their devices in the Android market. You can, in fact, sideload and direct download certain applications. And in addition, Android, or the Google Play Store, is on devices not made by Google, such as Samsung, where there's a competing Samsung app market. And those two stores might be charging different fees. So it's difficult to see the similarities between the two markets besides the 30% fee. Because there is more competition in the Android market, because there's the ability to sideload, because consumers can be reached even if Google says no.
Right, and I think the best way to kind of relate this is like, imagine if on your Windows computer or even on your MacBook, it was impossible to download and install a program, in that you had to go through like a Windows marketplace. And that idea just sounds so absurd on like a computer standpoint, just because I guess the way we've been using computers for so long, like the ability to just go onto the internet, find an application or a program, install it. But then, I guess here we've all just kind of accepted that using app stores is kind of the way it goes for touchscreen devices, because it's a bit more cumbersome to kind of go on Google and find a program and install it. But the suit also pushes the fact that these devices are more than just communicators. They're essentially mini computers at this point, right? And then to have such stringent control over how applications are installed, essentially Apple is trying to have it both ways. Do you think that my interpretation of things is fair?
Actually, there's been court cases that really support your intuition. There were antitrust suits against Microsoft and how it used its control over the Windows operating system to assert its dominance over the computer market. And we're seeing kind of an extension of that argument to smartphones. Essentially, the courts have recognized that computers are an everyday thing and that you have to use a computer today in the modern economy. And I think it makes sense to extend that to phones that we have in our pocket at all times and that have become so complex that they may as well just be small computers, like you say. When you prevent competition on these devices using your power over the device itself, it really can bring some harm to consumers by raising prices and the like.
I guess trying to relate this back to esports, Fortnite competitively is not really played on mobile devices to begin with. It's generally played on PC or console. For the esports scene, do you think this has some significant merit if Epic Games does win?
I think that the esports scene has a lot of different people invested in the outcome of this suit. We're going to see, actually, at the developer level, the most change should this suit be successful. Because esports, well, they depend on the video game at the outset. And many of these developers choose not to monetize their esports through high fees for the initial base game, but instead charge fees in-app for microtransactions or cosmetic purchases in order to essentially subsidize, in many cases, their esports scene. Even Riot Games has said that the esports scene wasn't very profitable and was only being subsidized by the in-game purchases. So I think that if Epic is successful against Apple and against Google, app developers, and that means esports game developers, will be able to get more money on the front end and perhaps be able to support the costs of investing in nascent esports scenes.
I do wonder, the mobile esports that are more popular around the world, so at the moment, any kind of in-app purchases on PUBG Mobile are, money is being funneled to Apple and Google. If Epic wins this suit, would that make a PUBG Mobile a more powerful force in the mobile esports economy because they're just making more money? Or is this really just a case of billion-dollar companies just wanting more money?
So I think there is some merit to say that mobile esports companies in general, or at least those game developers that are looking to invest in their esports companies, will be able to do so more easily. However, Epic can and has been criticized for, well, just being a large company, attacking another large company, and really just trying to get a slice of the pie. Epic's complaint against Apple explicitly recognizes that if another app store would be allowed on iOS devices, Epic Games Store would essentially come to the iOS device market. That means that they would be charging the fee and they would be getting the money. Some app developers may be benefiting from an injunction against Apple preventing them from maintaining that monopoly, and by permitting other app stores or by permitting direct purchases in-game without using Apple Pay, it really is Epic's opportunity to access the iOS market and, in Google's instance, the Android market.
Apple argues that it's charging this fee because it helps uphold the security, because they have to go and thoroughly check all the apps to make sure that there isn't a vulnerability that can harm, its user base. Do you think there's some kind of compromise in the middle here? I mean, could that fee be reduced to $10 and exclude in-app purchases, things like that? Or would this just mean that if Epic wins, that fees are illegal and Apple just has to eat the cost of maintaining security?
Right, so it's a pretty complicated question you ask. The first part of it goes to whether or not there will actually be some significant change to Apple's structure on the App Store. And the second one is Apple's reason for having that structure in the first place. So if Epic wins, it doesn't mean that the court will say, you can't charge 30%, that's illegal. Again, the court is not interested in mandating prices for competitors. The court, on the other hand, can say, Apple, you're using your gatekeeper privileges to gatekeep in defense of your own monopoly. You have to remove those prohibitions that prevent direct in-app purchases and prevent other app stores from existing on your iOS devices. Then it's the market's turn to react. The market will then allow in-app purchases and app stores on the iOS devices, like Epic, who will charge lower fees for both on the App Store as commission or in-game purchases through direct payment. And so the market would effectively force Apple to reduce the commission that it charges and to reduce that fee and in-app purchases. But as you mentioned, Apple has a good reason to be charging that 30% fee, or at least it thinks so. It provides a lot of value to app developers, providing different software packages and ensuring security for its user base. And in fact, when Apple has to argue its pro-competitive justification for the high fees, it will say, consumers rely on us to make sure that no app that will seek to misuse their data, access it inappropriately, or cause security harm gets to them. Therefore, in order to make sure that that happens, in order to fulfill that promise to consumers, we need to charge what that costs us, and that cost is 30%. Fortnite disagrees. Their value is only 12%.
Thanks, Michael. And actually, our Fan of the Week question has to do with this as well. It's from Farah Khaled. She's the editor over at Narrative Muse, a matchmaking service that connects people to book and TV recommendations. She asks,
something I'd be curious about your take on is whether or not this will finally get people interested in text monopoly. Because this is an old problem, to be honest, that has had trouble garnering attention outside the industry. But Fortnite's massive, and its community is so passionate. Then again, is its community of the age, or do they have the clout to get anything done about it? I feel like Spotify had the same problem a while ago, and it also disappeared from the news cycle after a while.
Hi, that's actually a really good question. You're right. Big companies have been fighting for a long while, and it seems that they're just spur of the moment. And in fact, Fortnite's brand is to be a big flash in the pan and then disappear. It could be that this case is just settled in the end, and we don't really see anything as a result. But the public has really moved against Apple. Congressional hearings have begun investigating into these 30% fees, and Fortnite now does have the clout, just like Amazon or Google or Facebook. And in fact, a number of competitors to Apple are equally criticizing Apple. Just a couple days back, Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, of course it's time to end the 30% fee in support of Epic. And so, while it might just be a flash in the pan, I think this movement is something more. We're truly seeing a reconsideration of what has been a standard industry practice. Spotify complained last year, but the investigation is still going on, and Apple is still under scrutiny. While it might not be in the public news, it's certainly ongoing.
Yeah, and I feel that it'll be important for Epic to reframe the argument against itself and start to advocate that, we're spending our billions of dollars to help regular app developers, regular people, because I think the idea of like billion-dollar companies just fighting each other gets, makes people kind of roll their eyes. But if Epic can continue to reframe the argument that college students will be able to have more money, will be able to create their apps and have more success in the future, et cetera, that it will democratize the app store in a way, then I think there's more public sentiment that could go towards Epic's favor.
Yeah, it's really hard to reconcile both the manufactured way that Epic is going about it, by forcing Apple, intentionally violating the TOS, forcing Apple to take down Fortnite, and then suing them as a result, and its message of Apple is harming consumers, not just big companies like us.
Well, we'll continue, I guess, following the story, and we'll have you back on when something major develops. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ahmad.